Okay, so thank you very much for joining my session that will be about sinking RMS Titanic. So if you like the movie Titanic and you have ever wondered how many people have been rescued from this disaster, you're in the right place. We will check did really women and children had a priority for the lifeboats? Who was the captain and did he really stay on board till the very end? By the way, did you know that the full list of all passengers and the crew is available on Wikipedia? So far, I didn't. But well, let me introduce myself. My name is Adam Kierzkowski, and I work in a produce company. That's a software house that hires already over 100 IT experts, including Apex team that consists at the moment more than 20 people now. And as Apex developer, I took part in a couple projects from different areas like telco, insurance, or pharma. And I have also participated in Apex competition that was organized last year, and the awards were given here. I mean, in Apex Connect during the last Apex Connect in Bonn. So that's about me. And why about charts? So just one time, my boss told me I need to prepare some graphs for one of our clients. And I thought it won't be a big problem. We have a region in Apex, chart region, so it shouldn't be any problem. The clue was that they had to be as close as it's possible to provided mockups by the client, and I thought that's easy too. So because we have this chart region that is highly customizable, but very soon it turned out that maybe it's not so hard, not so difficult, but not so developer friendly as I thought either. And that's what I would like to tell you about today. And I have prepared a sample dashboard. It's not very complicated, but it reflects some of the requirements that I had to fulfill during my project. And today I would like to go through this dashboard, through the implementation, starting from basics for those who have never created any chart in Apex before. Then I will give you a little bit technical introduction, how actually charts are implemented in Apex. And then we'll go to more advanced use cases. And below the charts, three charts that are on top, we have classic report, and it just presents us all the data that are source for our charts, and it's list of all people that I managed to find on the web who traveled by Titanic, either as passenger or as a crew. I have a little bit enhanced this report. I decoded the type column. Previously it was gender column, but I have decoded all people below 18-year-old to be displayed as children. So we can start. Let's start with the first chart. We can already see that it shows percentage of each group that survived the disaster, and we can see that men are more than a half of survivors, but let's don't rush with conclusions yet until we look closer to other charts. But how it's implemented? This is an application builder page with our dashboard, with our three charts, and here we have the first of them. So I won't go through the options on the right side of the screen because they are common for all Apex, most Apex components. There's nothing special about them. Instead, let's focus on the left side of the screen where what we have specific for charts here. We can see that under our chart region, we have two sections, attribute and series. let's start with series first. So in the series section, we got the options related to the data displayed on the graph. So first of all, we need to provide a source for our charts. And this works just the same as for any other Apex report. So we can choose whether we want to use a local database or some remote source. We can provide a SQL query or pure SQL function that returns query as varchar, or just simply point the table or view from the database. And as you can see, I put here a SQL query that selects all the people from my view. It's filtered by the information if they survived, and grouped by type, so the information about gender or being a children. The second step always is to provide a column mapping. So in this section, we need to choose what columns from SQL query will be displayed as label and which will be displayed as values. And that's the crucial thing to implement a chart. So that's enough, but let's look what we have more in those options. So firstly, we can see that we have also label section here. We can decide whether we want to show labels or not, where we want to show them, and how. And it's worth to mention that not all options from the select lists here and in any other section regarding charts, not all the options have effect for all types of charts. For example, inside or outside bar edge will have effect only for bar charts. So if I select them here for my pie chart, it simply doesn't work. And it's worth to remember. In this case, it's obvious, but there are some different options that may be a little bit confusing why they doesn't work for us. And we have also link and appearance section. With the link section, we can define a behavior of our application when some data items on the chart will be clicked. But I would like to skip both link and appearance section for later. Instead, let's jump to attribute section. In this section, we have options mostly related to the chart itself rather for the data. So most importantly, we can define a type of our chart. We can choose from quite wide range of types. In our case, it's a pie chart. I have defined also a title. Later, we got plenty of more or less obvious options, so I won't go into details about each of them. Just let's go through it rather quickly to know what we have here. So some layout settings, setting some pixel boundaries for our chart, behaving behavior of cursor, defining some formatting for the values, selection effects, animation, and more interesting tooltips and legend. Especially this legend section is more complex. And that would be all about our first chart. It's rather simple, and things are getting just a little bit more complicated, just a little bit if we have more than one series. Because in the first chart we had one series, only survivors, but in the second, in the middle chart, we have not only survivors, but also victims. And how we can implement that chart in Apex. We have at least two possibilities. The first possibility, here we have this middle chart, is the most easy one, the most basic. We can just create different series in the declarative way by right-clicking the series section to create new series. And in this way, we need to provide separate SQL query, separate source for each of our series. So as you can see, I put here just the same query as in the first chart. And for victims series, I put the same query, but I choose victims in the where clause. And that's all. And it's a great approach as it gives us much control, as we can define different options for each series separately. But it's not always possible to go this way during our development, because it may happen that during the development we don't precisely know how many series we will have. It could be dependent on some dynamic data, and I can show you what we can do in this case. I will create a new chart by drag and dropping chart region just below our middle chart. I should put here some title, not to left it with the new value. So it would be survivors and victims. I will copy this title, and as you could see, this title is just the title of Apex region, not the chart, and I have hidden all the Apex region titles from those regions above, so I will do the same for our chart. I will hide it, and now we can see that our series section is highlighted. That means that we are missing the source, and I will put here SQL query as well. And to speed things up, I have prepared this SQL query before, so I will let me just copy it and paste, and I will show you what's special about this one. Here, as you can see, we have no where clause in this SQL query. Instead, we choose survived column to be selected as just as a column in the select part of SQL query. And I press OK. And now in the column mapping section, I will choose series name as our new survived column. And that means that all the distinct values from survived column will define new series. So in this column, survived column, we have information about cross surviving. So just two values, yes and no, and they will provide us different series. And label and value stays the same. So I will just put it here. And now let's make this chart as close as possible to the original one above the one I have created. So I'll just turn on labels. Let's go to attribute section. Let's put a title here. Oops. So it would be survivors and victims. Let's turn on stacking also and turn on a legend and choose to be displayed on the top. So we have a little bit of tuning done. Let's run and see what we have. So as you can see, I have created pretty much the same chart as above. It differs by color, but I'll speak about colors later on. And we created only one series, but with a little trick, we got more of them, in fact, in the application. So let's talk quickly about the third chart now. The third chart, it seems like there's a little bit more going on here. We have more information. Despite that, we know about gender and the information about crash surviving. We know also if the passenger was traveling by the first class, second, or maybe he or she was from the crew. So it may seem that we have a deeper level of data here, but from the development perspective, it's just the same as the middle chart. So what's so special about this one? I can show you that in the developer application builder, we have created 6 separate series, and the series are a combination of the gender and information about crash surviving. And in the attributes section, I choose to stack all the bars one on each other. So why aren't they stacked together like in the middle chart? In the middle chart, we got 2 series and they are stacked together within each group. And in this one, men are stacked with men, women with women, and children with children. And here comes an attribute called stack category. So inside of each series, we can scroll to the appearance section, and we can see that here we have stack category, and all the series that shares common value here will be stacked together. So in women survivors, I put women, and for women victims, I also put women, and that's why those two series are stacked together. Okay, so I think that's all about the charts that I have implemented here. But if you were looking closely, you probably noticed that the bars on the middle chart are slightly wider than above. Maybe it's not so visible when I zoomed the application, but when I reset it, it's clearly visible that those bars are wider than those above. And it's not by accident. I have on purpose decreased the width of those bars above. But if you go to application builder and you search through different sections, different options, here you won't find any parameter, any option that can change the width of our bars. And I think that's a great moment to talk a little bit about how charts are implemented in Apex. So I will switch back to the presentation. So current version of charts in Apex exists since Apex version 5.1, when Apex was integrated with Oracle Jet. And Oracle Jet, the abbreviation stands for JavaScript Extension Toolkit, and it's a collection of open source or Oracle contributed libraries that helps developer to build rich client-side implementations. And if I had to tell about Jet in my own words, I would mention two things. And first of them are external JavaScript libraries. And one of two external libraries that I'd like to talk about is require.js. And require.js is used in Jet to load different JavaScript libraries, to load them asynchronously in the right order and taking care about all the dependencies between them. And normally, when we would like to include some JavaScript in our application, our HTML file would contain a bunch of script tags similar to those on the screen. But with require.js, we can use a define block where we pass the libraries that need to be loaded before execution of our code. And require.js will take this dependency list we specify, work out the correct ordering, and add those JavaScript libraries automatically for us. And also Oracle Jet uses a model view model architecture pattern. That's common for client-side implementations. And it provides two-way data binding, meaning that any changes in view model are automatically shown in the UI, and any user inputs in the UI elements is automatically reflected in the view model. When the model locally holds the data received from server, and the view is an interactive web page that end users will be seeing, view model can be understood as something intermediate. And that's exactly what Oracle Jet uses Knockout for. Knockout.js is another library, and Jet uses its core concepts like automatic dependency propagation, declarative bindings, and templating. But that's what we like Jet the most for. That's also the second thing I would like to tell about Jet are web components. So web components are basically a collection of standards set out by W3 Consortium to package all the code needed for some specific widget into a custom HTML element. And Jet provides developers plenty of web components. They are gathered just in one place. This place is called Oracle Jet Developers Cookbook, but maybe it's better if I show you online. In this Jet Developer Cookbook, among different web components, we can find that what we are interested the most, so charts. And in this page, we can see sample implementations of each web component and play with different configuration. That's especially good, beneficial for us Apex developers, as we can find a solution that we need much faster that we would do by trying different options in application builder and again and again and again. But does it mean all I've said about Jet, does it mean that we can use it in Application Express, all the libraries require JS or Knockout.js? Well, not exactly. So let's look what Apex documentation says about it. Here we have the documentation for Oracle Apex, and it says strictly that currently Oracle Application Express integrates only some parts of Oracle Jet, primarily with chart region types and text field with autocomplete. And moreover, although Oracle Jet provides two-way data binding using Knockout.js, currently Oracle Express does not natively utilize this aspect of the toolkit. It's not natively utilized, but you can try to implement Knockout.js in Apex on your own. It's doable, but I believe that's a topic for a separate presentation. Instead, let's look what doc says about required.js. So Oracle Apex does not use required.js fully to avoid some negative performance impact that may come with usage of this library. Instead, Oracle Application Express makes use of required.js optimization tool that somehow package all the code needed for charts and for text field with autocomplete item, and it packages this code and bundles in free minified JavaScript libraries, and those free JavaScript libraries are available in Apex for us, for developers, for plugin developers as well. So let's go to our application and let's see what we can do with our new knowledge. Firstly, I would mention that all the charts in Apex are encapsulated as jQuery widgets. So we don't need to exactly know or understand how require.js or knockout.js work. We just need to know a little bit of JavaScript, jQuery, and we need to know how we can refer to the widget, to the chart widget. So I will open now a developer tools in Chrome, and there is a rule that the chart widget is associated with DOM element that has a static ID as a combination of static ID of region in Apex. And I can show you quickly that our middle chart has a static ID set to chart. So it's a combination of the static ID of Apex region and underscore jet appendix. So let's select this DOM element, and the chart widget is named OJChart. This way we can call any method of this chart widget. But what exactly methods are available? To check that, we need to open a Jet documentation. To do that, we can use Google. Here I have opened tab, and we can type ojchart.js, for example, and here the first link would be that what we are looking for. For some reasons, I find it pretty difficult to find this documentation by going through or docsoracle.com, and finding it by Google, it's much faster. Perhaps it's a good idea to add this page to our bookmarks in the browser. And what we have here we have all the methods that we can call, all the events that the chart widget rises at some points, and all the options that we can set for our chart widget. And firstly, I would like to focus on the option method, because it allows us to read and set any option for our chart. And as you can see, it has couple overloads. And I will talk about the third overload that allows us to get all options. It's also the most basic one. We can use it without any other parameters, any other attributes. So I will use this method. Let's type here option. And as expected, it returns a JSON with all the settings that are currently set for all the options that are currently set for our chart. And among them, we can focus on, for example, the orientation option. And let's say that I would like to change it during the runtime of our application dynamically. I would like to change it from vertical to horizontal. So I will use another overload of option method, and after the name of method, I will pass another attribute called it will be the name of our option that we are changing, so orientation, and then a new value for this option, so it would be horizontal. And I won't press enter just yet. Before that, I would like you all focus on the middle chart to see what will be the effect of our code. Maybe it's visible now. Okay, so I'm pressing enter now. 1, 2, 3, go. As we could see, the changes are almost immediate. And some of you may wonder, how did I know the proper value here? Well, how did I know that the horizontal value is a valid value for this option, that it would be understood by the chart widget? So basically, I knew that because I found it before in the documentation. We can scroll up to all options. We can find orientation option. I think that it's visible, but I can try to zoom it a little bit. So we can, oh gosh, my browser freaks out. So we can find this orientation option, and it redirect us to supported values for this one, and a brief description. So now we know actually how to change some options dynamically, so we can create some dynamic actions to let our end users play with the charts during the application runtime. And to speed things up, I have created already a region with 2 buttons inside. The buttons are named Go Horizontal and Go Vertical. And to those buttons, I have assigned dynamic actions that triggers the execution of JavaScript code. The JavaScript code is just the same that we have just used in the developer tools. So let me just remove the server-side condition from this region to be shown. Let's save and run the page. So we can now see that we have two buttons and they work just fine. Okay, and there is one more way of using JavaScript to customize our graphs. We can go to our newly created chart, to go to attribute section and scroll down to the very bottom. And at the very bottom, we have advanced section with option JavaScript initialization code. And for this field, it's very useful to read the help text because it provides a sample function, sample code that we could paste here. So I will do that, and let's look what it does. This function actually takes just one attribute, one parameter, and it takes the option parameter. We can change those options inside of the function and then return those options to have our chart initialized with these changed options by us. There's one little restriction. If we want to change the options that are related to the data displayed on the graph, like colors of series, we need to do this inside one more nested function that should be assigned to the data filter parameter. And this function works just the same. It takes the data JSON, modifies it, and returns. And this is done like that because the data during the page initialization in the Apex sometimes are not already there. Sometimes the data is either refreshed or arrives a little bit after page load. So this function will be called once the data are ready to modify. Great, so we can finally set the proper width of bars in our middle chart. So I will remove unnecessary content, and we need to find a proper option to set. So I will go to the documentation. To speed things up, I will search the page by Control F, and I found it before the presentation to not to take too much time. But if you search for some specific option for the first time, it could take a while before you find what you need. And we can find that max bar width option is nested inside style defaults, and we can set this option to modify the maximum bar width. And I could have inspected the bars in the chart above, but I can remember exactly how wide should they be. So you need to believe me with this. They should have 50 pixels. I am not sure exactly what's the unit for this, but it should be 50. And now the bars are just equal. Great, so the one thing that we are missing from making those two graphs identical is the colors. So now maybe about colors. And for colors, we got at least 4 ways to set the colors for charts in Apex. First one is, as always, the most basic one. I will pick the chart, the middle chart, the original one. And in the series section, we can scroll down to the appearance, and in the appearance section, we have color property that we can set either by pasting some hash code, either by using some fancy color picker. but it has the same drawback as creating series declaratively as separate beings, because we can't use it in our chart that we created below. Here we got just one series that I created, and as a fact, we have more than one series in our application. So what we can do about it here? We can modify our query to have additional column that will define the color of the series. And here I have also prepared a SQL query to speed it up. So you can see that I have added additional column here. I put alias as a color, and it's not more than just a simple decode. I have decoded the survived column because the survived column defines our series, and survivors is decoded with the hash code, and victims another hash code of color. So let's press OK, and now I scroll down to the color property, and I can put here a substitution string with the name of our column that defines the colors in the SQL query. Now during the runtime, our colors will be substituted here, and the graph will be colored. Great. But what about the first chart? It also has just one series, so one place where we can put a color, and we have actually three, not series, but data items. The series is just one, that Titanic survivors. And here we can use once again JavaScript initialization code. So I'll go to our chart, to the attributes section, scroll down to the advanced section, and here we have our initialization code. And this way is, I think, a little bit maybe easier, because we can easily define an array with all the hash codes that we want to use. And all we had to do is a simple short for loop that will iterate through each series in the chart, or in case of this chart, it will iterate through different data items, and set the color property to corresponding hash code from the array. And during implementation, we don't really know at the beginning what's the order of series in our data JSON. So it's useful to console log our data here to find out what's the order, and adjust the order of hash codes in our array in variable declaration. What you can see here, in addition, is some commented line of code, and that's because in the previous project we had plenty of charts on many different pages, and those charts shared common measures. As example, I could give in our application we have children colored in orange, and the same orange color we have in this chart. So sometimes the color is pretty important. It gives also the brings some values with it. So we decided that it would be worth to keep the colors in one place, to make it easier, for example, to change one color in numerous pages and graphs with just one change, not plenty of them. So we decided that we can keep the colors as CSS classes instead of hash codes and configurations in all of the charts. And this array holds the different CSS classes. And we can, instead of assigning a color property, we can assign a class name property to our series or data items. But this way we need to also remember about creating CSS rules to color the charts. I have put it in the header of my page, but you can keep those CSS rules whenever you keep your CSS files in the application. And to color different types of charts, sometimes we need a field property, sometimes we need to set color. To be safe, I always put both of them in my CSS. So that's it about the colors, and I think that I talked about everything in this application, but we have still some time for a little bit polishing. So I thought that maybe it would be useful for end users if they could read the precise values from the hovered bar of both stacked series together. Like when I hover main bar, I can see the value of survivors and victims. But the clue is that the default Apex tooltip shows only the value regarding the hovered series, not the whole bar. So first thing I did to change it was opening application builder, going to our chart, going to attribute section, and scrolled to find the tooltip section. And it turns out that there's not much I can do about it. I can just change visibility of the tooltips, turn on or off some parts of it, but no major changes. So I visited the JET documentation one more time, looked through it, and I found, let me scroll down. I found option that's called tooltip renderer, and this option accepts name of the JavaScript function that will be called anytime user hovers a bar. So it will just return us our tooltip. And I had, of course, to implement this one. So let's go quickly through this implementation. I have also pasted it in the header of page for the presentation purposes. And the beginning is quite simple. It creates an empty div element that will be container for our tooltip. Later are some classes for styling, and then the function itself, custom tooltip renderer. It accepts one parameter, one attribute that we can, during development, we can console log it to find out what data is available for us. And the data available for us says us a lot about the hovered series, so we can easily read the stack category, for example, or the group. But it says nothing about other series in our chart. So one more time, I call option method of the OJ chart widget to basically read all the series. Then I filter out the series to have only those that I need to display on the tooltip. Later, I have some calculations to calculate the percentage of each group, survivors to victims ratio, and then at the bottom goes the template, HTML template for the tooltip element. I filled this template with obtained values. The last two lines of code are just to get rid of the default Apex border for the tooltips that you can see, for example, here. It's pretty hard to get rid of it different way. And that's it. And the outcome you could already see on the graph. And speaking really fast because I'm running out of time, there's one more way to provide a tooltip for our graph. And for those who are not so keen on JavaScript, it may be more interesting. Personally, I haven't used it, but I know that it works just fine. So in the series SQL query, we can have another column that will be define the content of our tooltip. And in the column mapping section, we can choose this column with the tooltip here. And basically we can display on the tooltip anything we can select in the select statement. And that's really all from my side about the charts for today. So thank you very much for joining my session. And if you are curious, for example, about Rose from the Titanic, is she on the list I found on the Wikipedia? I checked that for you. Sadly, she's not there. And just later on, my fiancée called me silly for checking it because it seems pretty obvious for her that Rose was just imaginary character, so she can't be on the list. And thank you once again, and I will be glad to answer your question if we still have time.
Yeah, Adam, thank you for your presentation. We have so far one question, and this is from Laban, and he asks, how can you add colors in a dynamic bar chart?
Dynamic bar chart. What do you mean by dynamic bar chart? You mean
well, I
with the
just
ones?
I just
Okay,
read the question.
sure. So if you mean that we have just one series created in the declarative way, like in the chart we created here, we can go either by modifying this JavaScript initialization code I've shown before, either by giving additional column in the series, like I did here, that define the color, and we can put this color column as a substitution string here in the color attribute, or the JavaScript. It's actually up to us. Which way do we prefer?
Okay. Another question, will the application be shared somewhere?
Yeah, so you can either reach me, I will bring it again, reach me on my email or Twitter. But I also try to upload this application to a GitHub to share it more easily. So for now, just ask me for in my email or Twitter.
Okay. Another question from Cornelia. Can I download a chart region as image?
As far as I know, it's not possible in pure Apex. I believe that one of my friends from my Apex team have prepared some downloading charts for one of our clients. So you can reach me on Twitter or email, and if it's important for you for some reasons, I could try to ask this my friend who did it, how did he did it, and try to help you with that. But in the native way, it's not possible.
Okay. There were two more questions about the application, about its availability. So, well, I recommend to upload it on GitLab or GitHub.
Yeah, so
People are quite interested. And the first question from Laban was also answered, so can't see any more questions. So thank you for your presentation.
thank you very much.
You
It was a pleasure.
had a lot of followers, so Well, see you next time then.
See you.